The final hour, a terrifying encounter with darkness. What if the darkness you thought you'd escaped was never truly gone? Asterisk, in a world where fear lingers and shadows never sleep, one figure is about to face the impossible. Watch as they confront the terrifying truth that sometimes the most haunting things are the ones that follow you forever. Will they survive, or will the darkness claim them once more? Keep watching to find out what happens when light fades and darkness rises again. The wind howled outside. A lone figure sat in the dimly lit room. The ticking of a clock echoed in the silence. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3. Time seemed to crawl. The air felt thick, suffocating. A sudden creak broke the stillness. The sound came from the corner, slow, relentless. A creak, a creak. Eyes darted to the source. Nothing, just shadows. The figure stood. A chill ran down their spine. The floorboards groaned underfoot. Each step was a beat of tension. The shadows seemed to twist around the edges of the room. There was something there, something watching. The walls felt closer now, as if they were closing in. A faint whisper echoed through the air. Was it the wind? No, this was different. It was a voice, soft, hushed. It called their name, but the room was empty. Only the ticking of the clock. Creak, creak. The door creaked slightly, then stopped. A sudden draft swept through the room. It smelled of damp earth, of decay. A soft shuffle, a movement in the darkness. Heart pounding. The figure backed away, but then silence. The stillness was unbearable. A cold sweat slicked the skin. The hair on their neck stood up. In the corner, a shape emerged. Tall, looming. It moved closer, closer. The figure's breath quickened. Was it real? It didn't feel real. The figure reached out. Something cold brushed against their skin. They gasped. The thing's eyes glowed in the dark. An unnatural, sickly yellow. Creak, creak. The room seemed to shrink even more. The clock's ticking grew louder, more urgent. Tick, tick, tick. Closer, closer. Then a thud. A heavy impact. The figure gasped, eyes wide with terror. The door slammed open. An intense light flooded the room. For a moment, everything froze. Then, everything went dark, and there was nothing but a sharp gasp filled the air. The figure's eyes fluttered open. They were no longer in the room. The light was gone, replaced by an overwhelming darkness. They couldn't move, frozen, unable to speak. Only the sound of their breath echoed in the suffocating blackness. A coldness wrapped around them like a thick blanket, a faint sound, almost imperceptible, a whisper barely audible. It grew louder, closer, a voice, malevolent, laced with a bitterness that made their skin crawl. "You cannot escape," it hissed. The air thickened, heavier than ever. The room, or whatever this place was, seemed to twist, like the walls themselves were alive. The figure struggled to breathe. Each inhalation a battle, each exhalation a weight. Something was moving toward them, slowly, deliberately. A shadow, darker than the surrounding blackness, slid across the floor. It was getting closer, closer. There was no escape. The figure tried to scream, but their voice was lost, drowned out by the oppressive silence. And then the shadow was upon them. A cold, clammy hand brushed against their cheek. A pulse raced through their veins. The shadow's grip tightened, tightened. Their heart thundered, desperate to break free from its cage. The voice whispered again, closer now. "You've been waiting, haven't you?" The figure's chest heaved. A cold laugh followed the words. Chilling. It was not the laugh of a person. It was the laugh of something ancient, something not quite human. The figure closed their eyes, but the laughter continued. It seemed to come from everywhere, inside their mind, outside their body. A nightmare turned real. The dark presence drew closer, looming over them, suffocating them. The figure's body trembled, and in that final, terrifying moment, the darkness whispered one last thing. The air thickened, becoming almost solid. A pressure pressed down on the figure's chest. They gasped, struggling to draw a breath. The whisper continued, vibrating through their bones. You were always mine. The cold hand tightened again. Fingers like ice dug into the skin. Pain bloomed, sharp, unyielding. But the figure couldn't move, couldn't scream. The room, or whatever this place was, felt endless. Darkness stretching to infinity. A hollow, empty void. They could feel the presence now, pressing in from every angle. It was all around them, suffocating them. Then a sudden shift, a flicker, a brief, fleeting glimpse of light, just enough to see. A silhouette, tall, unyielding. It was standing right in front of them. The figure's heart raced, their vision blurred. The silhouette's eyes glowed, sickly and yellow, like dying embers. The figure's breath quickened. The shadow moved closer, closer still. A low, guttural sound rumbled from the figure. The voice wasn't human. It was deep, terrifying. A deep growl, like something from the pit of hell. The presence loomed, so close now. The cold hand released its grip, but the darkness didn't retreat. No, it swirled around them like smoke, coiling, twisting. The figure could feel the walls closing in once more. Every inch of space felt filled with the weight of the presence, a suffocating, overwhelming force. In the distance, a sound, a crack, a break, like glass shattering. The figure's pulse quickened. The noise grew louder, closer, closer still. The sound of a door slamming open. A gust of wind howled through the dark. Then the laughter. It stopped. Everything stopped. The stillness was deafening. The figure stood frozen in the dark, heart pounding in their chest. They could hear nothing now, nothing except their own breath. Then the whisper again. You've come too far now. The darkness pulsed. And suddenly, everything went silent. The silence was suffocating. It pressed in from every side. The figure felt the weight of it unbearable, suffocating. The darkness around them pulsed, like it was alive. A heartbeat, not their own, throbbed through the air. The ground beneath them felt unstable, shifting. Unseen forces tugged at their limbs, pulling them in different directions. But they couldn't move, couldn't escape. A cold breeze swept across their skin. It smelled like earth, like decay. The faintest sliver of light flickered in the distance. A fleeting moment of hope. But it was gone before they could grasp it. They felt something behind them, a presence, so close, breathing on their neck. The figure's hair stood on end. Something cold and sharp brushed their back. A whisper followed, so close it seemed to come from inside their own mind. You've made your choice. The breath on their neck grew colder, harsher. Their skin prickled. The shadow behind them shifted, looming, growing larger. It was no longer just a presence. It was real. The figure could feel the weight of it pressing down on them. An overwhelming pressure. And then something more. A hand. Cold. Unyielding. It closed around their wrist. Tight. The fingers dug into the skin, leaving marks that burned like fire. The figure gasped, eyes wide with terror. No escape. Not now. The hand yanked them forward. The darkness seemed to stretch endlessly before them, like an abyss. But something new was there. A faint glow. A door. Not a door to escape, but a door to something else. The figure tried to move toward it, tried to run, but the hand was stronger. It pulled them back, dragging them into the heart of the darkness. No hope, no escape. And then, in a sudden, horrifying twist, the door slammed shut. The light flickered out. and the last breath of air was stolen from their lungs. The figure was left alone, alone in the dark, forever. The air was still, empty. The figure stood motionless in the crushing silence. Their breath was shallow, barely there. They couldn't move, couldn't feel their limbs. The darkness around them was like a thick fog, blinding. A heavy weight pressed down on their chest. A thudding pulse echoed in their ears. It felt like time had stopped. Then a sound, a soft scraping, faint but unmistakable. Something was dragging across the floor, slowly, relentlessly. The figure's heart skipped a beat. The scraping grew louder, closer. It came from behind them, closer still. The air grew colder. A new presence filled the space, unseen but unmistakable. The scraping stopped, and then came the breathing, low, heavy, like something waiting, watching. The figure's eyes darted to the sides. Nothing. The blackness stretched on endlessly. A cold sweat clung to their skin. Then the whisper returned, soft like the wind. "You shouldn't have come." The words froze them in place. The figure tried to turn, but their body wouldn't obey. Terror surged through them, sharp and burning. A shifting sound. The breath was closer now. It was behind them. They could feel the cold, rank air on the back of their neck. The presence was there. It was watching them, waiting. A sudden flash of movement. The figure spun around, but saw nothing. Nothing but the endless darkness. They took a step back. Another. A scraping sound followed, just behind them. Their body screamed for movement, but they couldn't move. Frozen. Trapped. Then a cold hand gripped their arm. Fingers like ice. They gasped, but no sound came out. The hand tightened, pulling them toward the endless void. The whisper followed. "You belong here." The figure's legs buckled beneath them. They couldn't breathe, couldn't fight back, and then everything went dark again. The darkness consumed them whole. There was nothing but the oppressive weight of it. No light, no sound, just the endless void. The figure tried to call out, but their voice was lost, swallowed by the blackness. The coldness seeped deeper into their bones. They were no longer sure where they were, if they were even anywhere at all. Time had no meaning here. It was like being suspended in an endless moment, trapped in a place that didn't exist. Then something else, a faint glimmer of light, a sliver, barely visible, but real. It grew just a little. It beckoned. Hope stirred. The figure stepped toward it instinctively. Each movement felt like pushing through thick, unseen barriers. They had to get closer, had to reach the light. It was all that remained. The darkness seemed to resist, wrapping tighter around them. But they pushed forward. The glimmer grew brighter now. The figure stumbled, their legs shaking, their body trembling from the cold. The light was closer, closer, almost within reach. But just as they stretched out their hand, the light flickered, a pulse, and went out. The figure's heart sank. Desperation flooded them. They couldn't stop now, not after coming so far. But something had changed. The darkness had shifted. It was moving, creeping. The scraping sound returned, echoing through the void, louder, closer. A chill ran up the figure's spine. It was there again, that presence, the same one from before. A weight pressed against them, breathing, hot, steady, too close. They tried to turn, but their body was slow, uncooperative. The figure reached out again, searching for the light. It had to be there. It had to be. The scraping grew frantic now, faster, as though something was approaching with intent. Closer, closer. The darkness seemed to pulse, tightening, swallowing them whole once more. And then a sharp, guttural voice whispered directly in their ear. "You were never meant to leave." The words sliced through the figure's mind like a blade. Cold, final. They froze, a sickening knot twisted in their stomach. The presence was so close now, they could feel it moving, breathing beside them. A wave of terror crashed over them. No escape, no way out. The scraping sound began again, this time relentless, as if something large and heavy was dragging itself across the floor toward them. The figure's pulse pounded in their ears. A deafening thud, a footstep, shook the ground. Then the darkness parted slightly, just enough to reveal a shadow, a shape, a grotesque figure, tall and twisted. It was coming closer. The figure's heart thrashed against their ribs. They tried to run, to move, but their legs wouldn't obey. Frozen in place, the shape loomed larger, its form becoming more clear. Its face, if you could call it that, was featureless, a blank canvas of shifting darkness. But the eyes glowed, a sickly, pale yellow, empty but hungry. The figure's breath caught in their throat. No way out, no way forward. The shape reached out, its cold hand inches from the figure's face. They could feel the coldness radiating off it, a frostbite touch, burning with icy fire. And then, the whisper again, "You were always meant to stay." The figure's chest tightened, their throat closed. They couldn't scream. The presence was overwhelming now. It enveloped them, like a suffocating fog. The eyes never left them. They were trapped, caught in the gaze of the creature, drawn in, paralyzed. A low rumble came from deep within the creature. A laugh, low, gravelly, and then a cold pressure, like the weight of the world was crushing them. The figure tried to fight, to move, to do anything, but their body wouldn't respond. The darkness, the cold, the suffocating weight of it all closed in around them. And in that moment, the final whisper rang clear. "You belong to me." The last breath of air was stolen from their lungs, and the world went silent. The silence was unbearable. It stretched out, thick and suffocating. No sound, no breath, nothing. The figure was trapped in the void. The presence was gone, but the weight, the pressure remained. It hung in the air like an unspoken truth. Coldness seeped deeper, crawling into their bones, freezing them from the inside out. Time no longer mattered. It was as though they had been forgotten, left in an endless dark space, suspended. Then a sudden flicker, a faint pulse of light in the distance, barely visible, but it was there. The figure's heart skipped a beat. Hope, the smallest spark of it. They reached toward it, hand trembling, but the light shifted, pulling further away, just out of reach. A cruel tease. The figure's mind raced. Had they been here before? Was this just another trick? Another false hope? They tried to move faster, to close the distance, but their body was heavy, sluggish. The more they tried, the more the light seemed to recede. A low growl rumbled from the shadows. The figure froze. That presence. It was back, looming, waiting. The figure turned, but it was too late. The creature was already there. Its form shifted and warped, twisting in the dark. A shadow with no shape, no end. Its eyes burned with the same sickly yellow glow. The figure stumbled back. The breath they had struggled to regain was gone again, stolen by the suffocating presence. It moved closer, a cold gust of wind swirling around them. "You'll never escape," the voice whispered, low and final. The figure could feel its breath, hot, rancid, on their skin. And then the grip. A cold hand latched onto their arm, digging into their flesh. The world around them darkened once more. Everything faded into a blur. The light was gone. The air was gone. Everything was gone. And the last thing the figure heard, before the darkness took them completely, the low, haunting laugh. It echoed in their ears. Forever, the laugh echoed, stretching into eternity, a sound that tore through the fabric of the void. It was no longer just a sound. It became a presence. It reverberated through the very air, vibrating in their chest, in their bones. The figure tried to scream, but no sound came. The cold hand tightened, pulling them deeper into the abyss. It felt as though the very darkness was swallowing them whole. There was no floor, no ceiling, just an endless stretch of nothingness. The world they once knew had ceased to exist. The last vestiges of hope had been consumed, erased by the cold grip of the presence. Every part of them was numb. Their body was a lifeless shell. And still, the laughter rang, low, deep, echoing, as if it was the only thing left in this place. Then, the presence spoke again. Its voice was twisted, distorted, like it came from every direction at once. You were always here. The words crawled under the figure's skin. They felt like they were being branded into their soul. The figure's chest tightened. There was no escape, no way back, no way forward. The hand released its grip, but it didn't matter. The figure was already lost. The shadows shifted around them, cold and unrelenting. A flicker of light appeared again, but this time it was different. It was distant, barely visible, yet unmistakable. It burned with a pale intensity, growing brighter, closer. But as the figure reached for it, the laughter grew louder, closer. It was right behind them now. The figure's body stiffened in terror. They turned, eyes wide, and there, looming in the darkness, was the creature. Its eyes gleamed with malevolent satisfaction. "You can't outrun it," it hissed. A breath so cold, it pierced to the core. The figure tried to move, but their legs buckled beneath them. They fell. The light vanished once again. The shadows closed in, wrapping around them like a suffocating shroud. And then everything stopped. Still, quiet, empty. The presence was gone. The laugh faded, but the figure was left there, alone, in the endless dark. Forever there was only stillness, an unbroken, suffocating silence. The absence of sound felt louder than any scream. The figure's body was numb, unmoving. They had no strength left, no will to fight. The darkness pressed in on them, thick and heavy. It was all-consuming. The last remnants of light had faded away. The shadows had swallowed them whole. But then, a flicker, a pulse, a spark of light, far in the distance, like a dying star. It didn't last long, barely a moment, and yet it stirred something deep within the figure. A memory, a thought, a fleeting hope. The figure reached out, instinctively. Their hand trembled, desperate. Was it possible? Could they be free? The light pulsed again, brighter this time, closer. The figure's heart pounded in their chest. A surge of panic and longing overwhelmed them. They had to reach it, had to grasp it, before it disappeared again. The darkness seemed to recoil. For a brief moment, there was room to move, room to breathe. The figure pushed forward, each step shaky, uncertain. But the light was fading, just a flicker in the vast emptiness. The figure's legs shook, but they kept moving, stumbling through the void. Closer, closer. Then, a harsh sound broke the fragile peace. A scraping noise, louder this time, closer. The darkness thickened once more. The light flickered out, just as the scraping grew louder, more insistent. A shape moved in the shadows, looming. The figure froze. The laughter returned, low, guttural, terrifying. "You will never leave." The cold, twisted voice echoed through the void, filling every corner, every crevice. The figure turned, but the shape was already there. It towered over them. Its eyes glowed with sickly yellow light, and its grin, a mouth filled with sharp, jagged teeth. The figure tried to scream, but no sound escaped. The creature reached out, fingers like claws. It was too late. The shadows closed in, swallowing the light. The figure was once again trapped in the endless dark, and the final whisper filled the space. "Forever, you're mine." The words echoed, lingering in the suffocating silence. Forever. A promise. A curse. The figure's body trembled, but there was no escape. No freedom. The darkness had claimed them. The presence was everywhere now. It filled the air with its cold, relentless weight. A low growl rumbled, vibrating through the void. The figure couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The creature's eyes glowed brighter now, like twin beacons in the black. And that grin, that terrible, twisted grin, it stretched impossibly wide. Closer, closer still. The figure tried to pull away, but their limbs were frozen, stiff as stone. The cold breath of the creature brushed against their ear, the hairs on their neck standing on end. "You should have never come," it whispered. The words slithered into their mind, wrapping around their thoughts, suffocating them. The figure's chest heaved, but no air filled their lungs. It was as though their very soul was being squeezed by the relentless pressure of the dark. The cold, dead fingers closed around their throat. Tight, tighter. They gasped, their vision blurring. No sound, no help. Only the darkness and the creature. The presence that had been lurking in the shadows. The thing that never left. The hand tightened once more, and the last shred of breath was stolen away. Then nothing. A hollow emptiness. No light, no sound, no escape. Just the crushing weight of silence. Time lost its meaning. The figure no longer existed, not in the way they once had. The darkness had consumed them completely. And the creature? It stood, still grinning, watching, waiting. Forever the stillness was absolute. The creature's presence lingered in the void, its form shifting and undulating, as if it were made of the very darkness itself. There was no movement, no sign of life. Everything was frozen in place. Time was a forgotten concept here. The figure had been erased, swallowed by the emptiness. But deep within the silence, something stirred. A faint hum. It was quiet at first, barely perceptible. A vibration in the air. Then it grew. Louder. Closer. A pulse. A rhythm. It didn't belong to the creature, though. It was something different. A crack appeared in the shadows. A crack that didn't belong. It spread slowly, like the first thread of light in a pitch-black room. The figure's consciousness flickered, something stirring deep within them. A thought. A flicker of recognition. The hum grew stronger. It was like a heartbeat. And as the crack spread, the figure's body, though still numb, seemed to respond. A small movement, a slight twitch of a finger. Then the light began to seep through. Slowly, relentlessly, the darkness recoiled. It retreated, pulling away from the crack. The figure's eyes fluttered open, or at least they tried to. Everything was blurry, faint. The space around them seemed to pulse with a strange, electric energy. The creature, still looming in the distance, seemed to hesitate. Its eyes narrowed. It sensed the change. The figure, struggling to breathe, felt something powerful, a force that hadn't been there before. They took a shaky step forward. The crack of light widened. The creature snarled, a deep rumbling sound. It was afraid. The figure's chest burned, but the force inside them pushed back the darkness. With each step, the light grew stronger. The creature stepped back, its form flickering in the distance. It was losing its hold. The figure moved faster now, the darkness no longer able to cling to them. They were breaking free. The light enveloped them. And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, the figure breathed. A full breath. The weight lifted. The shadows receded. The creature, now a mere silhouette in the distance, was fading, weakening. The light had become too bright, too powerful. The figure stumbled toward it, their movements shaky but determined. One last step, and they were free. The darkness, the cold, the fear, all gone, replaced by the warmth of the light. And for the first time in forever, there was peace. But somewhere, deep in the fading darkness, a voice whispered, "Not forever, only for now." The peace felt unreal, as though it might vanish at any moment. The figures stood in the light, breathing deeply, their chest rising and falling. The shadows behind them seemed to retreat, but the memory of them clung to the figure's mind. They glanced back once, the flicker of the darkness still haunting them, tugging at their thoughts. But the warmth, it was overwhelming, comforting. They had escaped. Or had they? The light seemed to pulse around them, almost alive. Each beat filled them with a sense of relief, a feeling of safety. But deep down, a gnawing doubt took root. Had they truly escaped? Or was this just another illusion, another trick? The figure took another step forward cautiously. Their foot brushed against something. Soft, solid, grass, real, alive. They looked down and saw the ground beneath their feet. Solid earth. A warm breeze caressed their face, gentle and familiar. For a moment, they simply stood there, absorbing it all. The sky overhead was clear. The air was fresh. This was not the dark void they had known. This was freedom. But the doubt grew stronger, a whisper in the back of their mind. What if it wasn't over? A sound broke the stillness. A low, grinding noise. The figure turned. A shadow stretched across the ground, far too large to be natural. The light flickered. A shape emerged from the dark edge of the light, its outline indistinct, shifting. Slowly it took form. It was there again, the creature. Its eyes glowed, burning with the same yellow, sickly light, and its grin, twisted and wide, stretched across its featureless face. "You can't run forever," it whispered. The figure's breath hitched. The warmth of the light began to waver, flickering uncertainly. The creature took a slow step forward, its movements deliberate. The figure stumbled back, their heart pounding in their chest. It had found them again. The darkness was never truly gone. It had only been waiting for the light to fade. And now it was closer than ever. The figure could feel its presence drawing near. The creature's laughter echoed across the air. It was only a matter of time before the light would flicker out. And when it did, there would be no escape. The figure's heart raced, each beat louder than the last. The warmth of the light flickered like a candle in a storm, barely holding back the encroaching darkness. They stumbled backward, feet unsteady on the solid ground, but the creature, looming relentless, was closing in, its eyes glowing brighter with each step it took. "You can't hide from me," it hissed, its voice like 1,000 whispers crawling under the skin. The figure's throat tightened. Every muscle in their body screamed for escape, yet they were paralyzed by fear. The shadows stretched like claws, creeping over the earth, pulling them deeper into the abyss. They looked around, desperate for a way out, but the light had shrunk, flickering weakly, as if it too was losing the will to fight. The creature's grin widened, stretching impossibly wide, revealing rows of jagged teeth. It was no longer just a shadow, no longer just an echo in the darkness. It was real, and it was hungry. The figure's breath caught in their chest, and for the first time in what felt like forever, they understood. There was no escape, not from it, not from the endless dark. But then something unexpected happened. A crack. It began small, almost imperceptible, but it grew. A split in the very air around them. The light began to pulse again, brighter this time, stronger than before. The shadows recoiled, twisting away from the expanding light as if they were alive, afraid of what was to come. The creature screeched, a sound so horrifying it sent a chill down the figure's spine. It raised its arms, its form warping and shifting as it tried to hold onto the darkness. But it was too late. The light surged. The figure stepped forward, heart pounding, mind numb with disbelief. They reached out, hands trembling, grasping for something, anything that could hold the light together. It wrapped around them like a shield, a force that held back the dark. The creature howled, its form dissolving, crumbling into the light. The shadows shrank back, their power fading. And then silence. The figure stood there, breathing, but the world around them had changed. The light had won, for now. But somewhere deep in the fading shadows, the creature's voice whispered, soft but unmistakable. Rest now, but know this. Darkness never truly dies. The figure stood, breath heavy but steady. The light was now fully restored, radiating warmth that bathed every inch of the surroundings. The darkness, once suffocating, had been pushed back, retreating like a storm cloud breaking apart in the wake of dawn. It was peaceful now. The wind whispered softly through the trees, carrying the scent of fresh earth and life. The air, once thick with fear, had become light and pure. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, the figure felt a sense of calm settle in their chest. But the memories of the darkness, the creature's eyes, its relentless pursuit, lingered in the corners of their mind, never quite fading away. Still, they took a step forward, feeling the solid ground beneath their feet. The path ahead was clear, and though uncertainty still hung in the air, there was a quiet assurance in the figure's heart. They had fought the darkness. They had survived, and that alone was worth something. As the figure continued down the path, the soft light of the day stretching before them, there was a sense of release, of finality. They were no longer trapped in that endless void, no longer bound by the creature's grasp. They were free. But deep inside, a question echoed, quiet but persistent. Had they truly escaped? Or had they simply traded one prison for another? The wind shifted, and for a brief moment, the light seemed to flicker, just a flicker, before it steadied once more. The figure paused, their hand hovering in the air, as though reaching out for something just out of reach. But no, it was only a fleeting thought, nothing more. They let it go. The path before them stretched on, and with it came the certainty that they could walk it. Whatever awaited, whatever shadows lingered on the horizon, they would face it. But for now, for this moment, the figure allowed themselves to breathe deeply, feeling the warmth of the sun on their face. And as the wind carried their footsteps forward, the darkness was no longer a threat, but a memory, fading slowly, gently, until it was nothing more than a whisper on the wind, a whisper that would eventually be forgotten.